Madam Speaker, it is indeed a great and rare honour to be able to stand in the House of Commons to sponsor and present a piece of legislation for all of my colleagues to consider. And with that being said, I am pleased to kick off the debate on Bill C-277, the National Strategy on Brain Injuries Act. Before I get into the details of the bill, Madam Speaker, I want to start by sharing three personal stories so that members in this chamber who are listening can get a real sense of why this national strategy is so important. I want to tell you the story of Kyle Mockford from my riding, who in 2012 was brutally attacked from behind, being struck up to 20 times in the head before collapsing unconscious. For months afterwards, he experienced severe headaches, balance problems, fatigue, poor coordination, and reductions in reasoning skills, concentration, and memory. This was followed by bouts of depression, anxiety, compulsive aggressive behaviors, and PTSD, all of which got progressively worse after the attack. In his words, quote, "I expect I'll never get back to being completely normal, but I'm finally doing the proper things to get back to normal as much as is possible after falling through the cracks for so long. I want to shine a light on how serious brain injuries can be and that they can and will have long-lasting consequences and effects on a person's life." Madam Speaker, I also want to tell you the story of Derek Forsyth from Victoria, a man who has 85 criminal convictions and who was caught up in a vicious and repeating cycle of doing time in prison, getting out, and doing time again. A series of undiagnosed brain injuries dating back to his childhood led to frequent interactions with our criminal justice system and to an addiction to drugs. But with proper support, Madam Speaker, he has turned his life around. Derek still faces symptoms of the brain injury, including extreme fatigue, which will never go away, but he says that dealing with the injury has taught him how to be more giving, understanding, and compassionate. And finally, Madam Speaker, I want to tell you the story of Abbotsford resident and school trustee Shirley Wilson and her late son, Jacob. Jacob suffered a traumatic brain injury after he was struck by a pickup truck in August of 2018 at the age of 21, while he was walking along Marshall Road in Abbotsford. He was resuscitated 3 times by medical teams that night. Over the last years of his life, the devastating injuries he sustained led to isolation, psychosis, drug addiction, and eventually his death by an accidental fentanyl overdose on November 11th of 2021. He was just 24 years old. Madam Speaker, now for the statistics. Brain injuries are often known as the hidden epidemic because the people who have them don't always bear physical scars. They can very generally be separated, acquired brain injuries, into traumatic and non-traumatic kind. The traumatic brain injuries can come from assault, from playing sports, from motor vehicle accidents, and non-traumatic acquired brain injuries can come from strokes, from overdoses, and from aneurysms. It is estimated that over 160,000 new cases of brain injury happen annually in Canada, and that there's an estimated national prevalence of over 1.5 million cases. Traumatic brain injuries are 44 more times more common than spinal cord injuries, 30 times more common than breast cancer, and 400 times more common than HIV/AIDS. In fact, the incidence and prevalence of brain injury surpasses that of HIV/AIDS, spinal cord injury, breast cancer, and multiple sclerosis combined. We know that brain injuries contribute to homelessness, to incarceration, to substance use, and to mental health issues. We know that brain injury survivors face a 200% increased risk of struggling with addictions, and their risk of suicide increases by 400% after a brain injury. Despite these stark statistics, Madam Speaker, funding for the awareness, prevention, and treatment pales in comparison with many other ailments impacting the health and well-being of Canadians. And I would just, we all know about Heart and Stroke Canada and the Canadian Cancer Society and the good work that they do. But Brain Injury Canada and the knowing of brain injuries and how common they are in Canada pales in comparison. The rate of traumatic brain injury increases in older groups. We do have an aging demographic, and we know that those over 60 account for 29% of all head injury hospitalizations. We also know that seniors with brain injuries can experience accelerated aging effects and that there can be an increased risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. So in response to all of these facts and to the many, many champions who are working to get this strategy into place, I worked to introduce Bill C-277, the bill that we are considering this evening. Now, this bill didn't develop in a vacuum, Madam Speaker, and I want to single out a particular individual from my riding from the city of Langford, Janelle Brice Biagioni. I've known her for quite some time. She's a very persistent constituent, very passionate about these issues, and it was through conversations with her that I first came through to developing the idea of putting in place a national strategy to address brain injuries, because her story is very personal. Her late husband, Constable Gerald Brice, was once a member of the RCMP, and while he was on duty on his motorcycle, he was involved in a motor vehicle accident. And he went into a coma and unfortunately eventually succumbed to his injury. So for her, this is very personal, and it eventually led to me introducing the original Bill C-323 in the previous 43rd Parliament. It was then that it got the attention of Brain Injury Canada, and I really want to recognize Brain Injury Canada and Michelle McDonald. They have been a tremendous organization. They do such incredible work from coast to coast to coast. And through consultations with Brain Injury Canada, and we developed the bill that you see today. So this bill was very much co-written with Brain Injury Canada, and I can't thank them enough for their valuable input and the stakeholders that they have reached out to. Because truly, Madam Speaker, this bill has taken on a life of its own. There are so many people with lived experience, so many organizations, so many people who are working in research who have reached out to my office, who are mounting a campaign outside of my efforts inside of the House of Commons to raise awareness. And I think of March of Dimes Canada, all of the provincial injury associations, the Cowichan Brain Injury Society from my own riding of Cowichan, Malahat, Langford, the Concussion Legacy Foundation of Canada, but also prominent individuals like Dr. Gabor Mate, who has also lent his support to this bill. And what an honor to have such a learned individual who's been so active in this field to lend his support. So now to the language of the bill, Madam Speaker. Essentially, this is a national strategy that is going to require the Minister of Health to consult with representatives of provincial governments, with Indigenous groups, and with relevant stakeholders to develop this strategy to support and improve awareness, prevention and treatment, as well as rehabilitation of persons living with a brain injury. The strategy includes a number of measures, 11 in total, and I won't go through all of them in detail, but very briefly, they include measures like identifying the training, education, and guidance needs of healthcare and other professionals who work in this field, promoting research and improving data collection on the incidence and treatment of brain injuries, promoting information and knowledge sharing, creating national guidelines on the prevention, diagnosis, and management of brain injuries, and also fostering collaboration with and providing financial support to those associations that do this important work. But the two items I really want to highlight are that it will ask the Minister of Health to encourage consultation with mental health professionals, particularly in educational institutions, sports organizations, and workplaces, to provide persons who are suffering from the effects of a brain injury, including mental health and addiction problems, with a support system within the community, but also to identify challenges resulting from a brain injury, such as mental health problems, addiction, housing, and homelessness issues, and criminality, including intimate partner violence, and to work to develop solutions in collaboration with stakeholders. And I think if we canvass members in this House, we can all agree that those are issues affecting all of our ridings in all of our communities within them. So, Madam Speaker, let's get to the why we need this bill. And I first want to apply a gender lens to this bill, because professional sports get a lot of attention with respect to head injuries, but I really want to leave people with this startling fact. For every NHL hockey player who suffers a concussion in sport, more than 5,500 Canadian women sustain the same injury from domestic violence. Women in families also tend to be disproportionately higher burdened with the responsibility of providing care to loved ones. I also think that we need to spend time talking about the intersection of brain injury with our criminal justice system. And Brain Injury Canada has done a lot of work on this. Evidence shows that sustaining a traumatic brain injury increases the risk of involvement with the criminal justice system. There are many common cognitive, emotional, and behavioral symptoms or impairments that can increase the chance of a negative interaction with police and with the justice system. And these can include, Madam Speaker, anger management issues, challenges with processing information, engaging in high-risk behaviors, inappropriate emotional responses, lack of impulse control, memory impairments, and poor judgment. And I know from speaking to police in my role as the public safety critic, I have also spoken with members who work in our federal correctional system, both the program officers within and the parole officers who work on the outside. And certainly their firsthand accounts of undiagnosed brain injury within our prison system is absolutely been startling testimony to hear from directly. So it is a very real problem. And if we want to be serious about addressing some of the major societal issues like criminality, I think addressing undiagnosed and even diagnosed brain injuries is going to go a long way to helping these people lead productive lives. I also want to talk, Madam Speaker, about the intersection with opioid use in our communities. One of the existing challenges with the treatment of substance use and brain injury at the same time is that the current programs are not equipped to handle both. The majority of brain injury rehabilitation, community and support programs require participants to be sober. But similarly, the centers and programs that specialize in addiction support are not able to handle the complex needs of someone who has a brain injury. So again, two very real problems, often interconnected, but we don't yet have adequate support and treatment systems to deal when they happen at the same time. And I know in the communities I represent, and I think this is the same for right across Canada, this is a very real issue. So, Madam Speaker, I want to wrap up by saying that there is very much a poor understanding of brain injury and its consequences in both health and social care systems. I think it's very well known amongst some segments of the population, but I don't think yet that policy-wise we have yet gotten a firm grasp on the situation. And I believe, and I hope all members will support me in this, that by legislating this requirement for a national strategy, we can truly start treating this major societal problem with the urgency and resources it needs. It is a problem bigger than any one province or territory can handle on its own. We know that with proper treatment and support, many people with brain injuries can return to productive and engaging lives. It's amazing that I've already had support from the City of Victoria, the City of Langford, North Cowichan, and Nanaimo, and I think many more municipalities are going to follow suit given the problems they are dealing with in their populations. I sincerely hope all colleagues are going to join with me and support the principle of this bill and send it to the Health Committee where it belongs. I want to end, Madam Speaker, with a quote from Dr. Gabor Mate. Quote, "Brain injury is one of the hidden epidemics, too often unrecognized, that exacts a heavy toll on sufferers, their families, and caregivers. It has many health implications which may last a lifetime. Children with brain injuries, for example, are at an elevated risk for depression. Other potential consequences of traumatic brain injury include loss of behavioral control, aggression, memory loss, dementia, and potentially substance abuse. Nearly half the homeless population have endured a brain injury. A national strategy that entails the proper education of health personnel, teachers, social workers, law enforcement people, service providers, and policymakers at all levels is urgently needed. Based on my clinical work and on my extensive reading of the research literature, I fully support this initiative." So that's a quote from Dr. Gabor Mate. I urge all members to listen to those wise words, to the many people campaigning for this bill, to give your support to this bill, to send it to the Standing Committee. I thank all members in this House for their consideration.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Guelph.